And we're going to try and leave some time for questions in the middle before we move on to our final segment. To also make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and taking care of each other. With all this anxiety and fear, it might be affecting you emotionally, physically, in a way that you may or may not recognize. So we have a link to a really, really wonderful toolkit that has some just exercises that you may want to do both as an individual or if you're meeting in community spaces or with different organizations to sort of connect and to recharge so that you can be resilient and continue to fight the good fight that you have been doing for so long. So this is a really wonderful website. It's weareheretostay.org. It's got all sorts of different resources that we're going to be referencing during the course of the presentation. But again, this mental health toolkit is wonderful. It's got information on mindfulness, breathing exercises, steps to stay calm, and also links to mental health resources as well that can be really useful.
And we're going to be making this presentation, also the PowerPoint itself, with the hyperlinks available to make these resources easy for you to spot.
Yeah, and I just wanted to introduce Melissa Niemeyer. Is she here? Oh, she just stepped out. Okay, well, when she comes back in, she's going to talk about some of the on-campus resources. Oh, here she comes.
For a lot of us, I think Melissa is the embodiment of how we're not alone, and that it's rare to meet somebody in administration who cares as much as Melissa.
Hi, sorry. We were great to have such a great turnout. We wanted to make sure it was intimate setting. So unfortunately, or a good problem, is that we didn't have enough chairs. So we're glad that you all can make it out today. We just definitely want to make sure that you know the university is here to support you. We're all saddened by the news, but we know we want to support you as best as we can.
So today we're going to go through what we do know and a few things we do not know about what was announced yesterday. We're going to talk very concretely about what those who have DACA should be thinking about right now. We're going to talk just briefly about the future of the dream, because the dream has a future. To the extent we have time at the end after questions, we'll go on to safety planning, sort of responding when ICE shows up and all the nightmare scenarios that we really hope are distant worst case scenarios. But we've got information, time permitting. We will definitely also be sharing resources and specifically ways to help. Some of you are very directly affected through yourself, family members, friends, and some of you are here to show support, and so we want to provide both groups with things that they can do.
And so there's links throughout the PowerPoint, and like we said, the PowerPoint is going to be available. And then in the back, there are a couple of different handouts. And also for those folks who might be directly impacted by DACA, there's a place where you can put information to get contacted about upcoming consultations, which we're going to talk about later in the presentation. So what is it that we know? Yesterday, the Trump administration announced the end of Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or commonly known as DACA, and rescinded the 2012 memo that provided guidance on how to apply that application, and issued a new memo talking about the phasing out of the DACA program. So we're going to talk about the different sort of scenarios that you might find yourself or your friends or families in. So the first thing is that if you're filing for DACA for the very first time, provided your application is pending and was received by the government as of September 5th, the application is still going to be adjudicated. So if you have an application that hasn't yet reached USCIS or the Department of Homeland Security, you are unfortunately out of luck at this time. Renewals. So they will be accepting renewal applications for anyone who has a work permit that's going to expire between now and March of 2018. However, you only have until October 5th to file your renewal application. So if you were to look at your work permit and you see that it's going to be expiring on December 10th, 2017, you would still be eligible to file a renewal. if your work permit is going to be expiring in April 5th, 2018, unfortunately, you're not eligible to file a renewal application, and we're going to talk later about what that might mean. One big thing is that there is a $495 fee for the renewal application, which we understand is a lot of money for a lot of people. So in terms of if you're here looking for ways to help, we're going to be announcing shortly different mechanisms to sort of fundraise to help fund DACA renewals for people here within our community, and any leftover funds would be going to local nonprofits to ensure that money is not a factor in terms of thinking about renewal.
And this will be a great place for student associations from undergrad, the business school, all the different parts of our campus to coordinate. We've got the Immigration Law Association, Latino Law Students Association already at the law school doing some fundraising. I'm sure you would love some help, am I right?
Yes.
Yes.
So we'll make sure to announce all that information through the Daily Digest and other mechanisms so that people know about that. One question though is, should you renew? And this is a question that everyone needs to ask themselves. There may be risks associated. For example, if between the time of your last approval notice and the time you're thinking about renewing, maybe you've had some contact with the police, you might be thinking about whether or not you want to renew. So one of the big things that we're really encouraging is for people to consult with immigration attorneys or accredited representatives before filing their renewals. And we're going to be providing free consultations for the University of Baltimore community. And we're going to schedule our first one on Saturday, September 16th from 9 to noon. And we'll be sending, again, more information through the digest, but also in the back, there's index cards where you can put your information if you want to be contacted. In addition, for folks who might have friends or family who don't live in Baltimore but live somewhere else in Maryland and are looking for resources, we're going to provide later on a link to the Maryland Coalition for Immigrant Rights. Is that the name? Close enough. That's going to be providing free consultations as well in the upcoming weeks. So again, we want to really encourage people to sort of think about their own situation and consult with an attorney before filing any renewal applications. And also to be wary not to work with notarios, which are often thought of as having the ability to submit immigration documents because of their status in other countries, but here in the United States are not authorized to do so. And we've got some links on notario fraud as well in our presentation.
So, two other things that we do know. In terms of revocation, there's a lot of fear right now that DACA is gone as of yesterday, and that is not the case. That is not the case. If you have a work permit that's good through 2019, you've got your DACA and your work permit through to whatever the date is on the work permit. It's not going away. The ability in 2019 to extend it, that's gone. But your work permit and the work permits of folks you know, they're good. And they're still good for as long as you thought you had, you still have that time. Your work permits are not being revoked. And that's, please emphasize that when you talk to people who are concerned, because people are already not showing up at classes out of fear that they're a priority for deportation today. No, they have DACA for exactly as long as they already thought they had DACA, okay? Super important point of reassurance. Travel. If a lot of folks on DACA were able to get something called advanced parole, if they were traveling, to see family members in another country, and it would let them come back. The government is still honoring advanced parole for those who already have it. So the document's usually good for a certain time period. Those are still good. Advanced parole is always a little tricky, right? Because the government's saying, we're almost certainly going to let you back in. That's really advanced parole, and it's that almost certainly that makes immigration lawyers nervous. So if you have DACA and you have advanced parole, talk to the lawyer before going, just to make sure there's nothing that would trip you up coming back in. But those are still good. Here's another important piece of information, something we do not know. It was not addressed pro or against in yesterday's announcement. what will happen once DACA status expires? The assumption is, of a lot of people, is that the day it expires, ICE is going to come knocking on my door and I'm in deportation proceedings. We don't know that, actually. It takes a government policy to initiate removal proceedings when a benefit like DACA expires. It's not automatic. They may try to create a policy that says as soon as it expires, we will send the case over to the enforcement folks and start the proceedings. That's possible. We will be fighting hard so that that does not become part of this sort of set of issues. But for now, we just cannot assume people are going to be immediate targets for deportation the day their work permit expires. That's part one of reassurance. Sort of rumors about imminent deportability are at this point just rumors. They're not grounded in any fact that we got from the government yesterday. Part two of reassurance, I don't know, it's not, we're grasping at reassurance. But deportation is a very slow process, and it has some constitutional protections. It takes a long time. We have 5 judges in Baltimore who, before DACA goes away, had 23,000 pending cases. It's slow. It's slow. So there's going to be time to develop legal strategies, to find lawyers, to seek other forms of relief, even if a policy goes into place where the end of DACA puts you in deportation proceedings. Again, we don't have that scenario, not yet, hopefully never. But even if we did, it doesn't mean the next day you're on a plane somewhere. It just doesn't work like that.
And I guess one other maybe caveat, I don't know if it's reassurance or not, but USCIS is, within the Department of Homeland Security, there's 2 different branches. You've got USCIS, which is taking the applications or the sort of benefits branch, and you've got ICE, which is the enforcement branch. And so people who have applied for DACA have submitted their application to USCIS. And they've stated that that information included within the DACA application will not be shared with ICE unless there is some sort of fraud or public safety concerns. But as Liz mentioned, that's just the policy. It's subject to change, but as of right now, they reiterated in their FAQs that they issued yesterday that that policy is still in place. So I don't know if that makes you feel better or worse, but it's just something to kind of be mindful of, is that there's sort of 2 branches within the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security. Oops, wrong way.
So just briefly, we don't know what the next steps are. There's a lot going on, even as of yesterday. The big push, and even since we wrote "We Don't Know Yet," there were more tweets suggesting that maybe DACA will come back in 6 months. I don't trust tweets at all, but there's a lot of uncertainty about DACA itself, what's going to actually happen with it. In the meantime, and for some good reasons, the action and the focus are turning to Congress, because Congress can fix this, and Congress has before it, since 2000, legislation called the DREAM Act that confers not just this temporary, always renewing status that DACA holders have had, but a path to citizenship. It's a popular bill. We're going to be fighting, and people are organizing already to get Congress to do something about this. So they're look for legislative action on this. And lawyers already filed lawsuits to stop even the revocation. And there's some really interesting issues about the fact that you can't take something this meaningful away with such lack of government process. That's the gist of their lawsuit. And it's a novel issue, so we don't know what will happen, but you've got some really smart people that if I had to handpick who would do this lawsuit, I would have handpicked the ones who did it, trying to actually stop this DACA revocation from happening. So we don't know. But the dream in my book, your book, hopefully a lot of our books, the dream is still alive. And I think they don't know what they're up against when it comes to activism and organizing on this.
And maybe to make a point about the event that's happening tonight related to
Oh,
activism.
yes. 7 o'clock tonight at Sacred Heart Church in Highlandtown. It's on Conkling Street. CASA of Maryland is organizing a meeting to get the community to start speaking with one voice on the DACA issue. CASA has always been a leader on the DREAM Act, Maryland DREAM Act, and DACA, and so they are assembling there tonight at 7 o'clock for people who are interested.
And there's lots of events going on also in DC over this weekend, and you can find more information if you're interested in either going to rallies or protests or hosting community forums or making calls to your congressman through the United We Dream website that we linked earlier.
And for those who haven't seen it, the Chancellor of the University of Maryland system just issued a statement to Maryland's congressional delegation urging passage of the DREAM Act. And it's a lovely acknowledgement of why the folks with DACA matter to us. It's on the front of the university website.
Work permit expires and the Department of Homeland Security begins to initiate deportation proceedings. Know that we have a huge backlog and a bureaucratic system and due process protections that exist, and that there are attorneys for free or low cost that will be able to assist. There may be other ways as well for you to stay in this, stay here in the United States. So our first sort of priority is ensuring that those who are eligible for DACA renewals do so by October 5th. But then we will sort of be shifting gears and providing opportunities for sort of more comprehensive immigration consultations to see if maybe you qualify for some other form of immigration relief. Perhaps you might qualify for asylum, or maybe you've been a victim of a crime here in the United States and would qualify for a U visa. So we want to make sure that we're doing comprehensive screenings to find out if there's other paths for you to legalize your status here in the United States. Some people traveled, as we mentioned before, on advanced parole and entered the United States lawfully. And so they might have more opportunities now to apply or qualify for different forms of immigration relief. So that's also why it's so important to sort of get that comprehensive screening to see what your options might be. And again, as we mentioned before, we don't know exactly yet what's going to happen with the expiration of your DACA status and your work permits. So one thing is that we wanted to make sure to sort of go over this resource so that people know just how wonderful it is, because I imagine that a lot of people with DACA and work permits that are going to be expiring have a lot of questions related to workplace rights. Whether or not you need to inform your employer if your DACA is expiring, the answer is no. You don't have an affirmative obligation to do so. There's information here on what you can do if your employer asks you for your work permit or asks for re-verification. Information here in regards to social security numbers, that regardless of the work permit's expiration, it stays with you. And information about what your employer might be able to do if they don't agree with ICE. So we wanted just to make sure we pulled this up to explain that there are answers to a lot of questions that folks have, and because we don't have time today, we won't be able to go over all of them. But again, this resource is here. It's on weareheretostay.org, and it's DACA Rescission and Workplace Rights, and they also have a frequently asked questions that's really useful as well.
And we were going to ask Melissa to speak just briefly to the tuition issues.
So I have gotten a lot of questions from students wondering what will happen to my tuition rate, will changes be made? All of that's made by the University System of Maryland and Maryland state legislation. So currently I believe they're working on what that plan would be. There has not been made any changes. But I know that's high in people's mind, and our university registrar actually would be the expert in that area of kind of what might come down the road, what things currently look like. no changes have been announced to us as of yet. But if you do have questions, that half sheet, please feel free to fill it out, and we will direct them to the appropriate person, whether it be related to your in-state tuition rate, whether it may be more related to a legal question that Nickole and Elizabeth can answer, and just fill it out, and we'll try to follow up with you to the best of our abilities to answer that question. Some might be, we're waiting to hear from the state what's going to happen, and unfortunately that's not the greatest answer that students want to hear, because we know you're all very anxious. It plays a big role in your attending school, but please fill that out. If you don't feel comfortable putting your name and email, we won't be able to follow up with you directly, but we can still forward those questions on to the appropriate person so that they know these questions are in your minds so that we can address them.
These are a few very simple ideas. One is to just be a reliable source of information and freely share the resources that we're sharing with you today, whether it's the PowerPoint with the links, directing people to the website, we're here to stay.org. There's a lot of bad information that can fly very quickly through the ether. There's a lot of excellent information available as well, so please be a purveyor of good information. Contact your representatives and senator quickly to urge them to pass the DREAM Act. Our delegation in Maryland, especially our senators, they are going to be supportive. Your individual representatives may differ, but they need to hear from us, and they need, even when they're supportive, they need to hear in large volumes that Marylanders care about this, so please do that. Nickole mentioned earlier the need for, actually this is slightly different, there are scholarship funds for undocumented students that will be extra important if tuition rates do change. We hope they don't, but those would be a great place to donate. And raise money short term for these renewals. $500, $495 is a lot to come up with in a few weeks. And so we will be figuring out the mechanism for accepting those funds very, very shortly. We do have the Maryland DREAM Act. The interpretation of that, I guess, is being discussed right now, but that's a state law that provides in-state tuition regardless of citizenship or immigration status, and that is not affected by federal immigration policy. It's purely a state law, so we still have it. Support your local immigration nonprofits, and I would add to that organizations like United We Dream that are really of and for the community of the undocumented. And then most important, maybe, easiest and hardest at the same time, smile, laugh, and keep hope alive. Dreamers have been in this fight for a long time. It started going in 2000. They've been marching, they've been protesting, they've been organizing. They're going to keep doing this, knowing that, but they need our energy and support now more than ever. So if you know a dreamer, send them all the love, all the coffee, all the whatever you can, and that may sound like an incredibly stupid thing, and yet I think it's really important, and it's something within our power. We need to keep the hope alive, and we need to be at their side. They know how to do this. They know how to organize, but with them, with us at their side, for allies at their side, I think we can really help keep their spirits up.
So a couple of more resources just to draw your attention to. For those who have maybe friends or family or students, classmates who weren't able to make the presentation today, we're going to have this information recorded, but there's also going to be a free webinar on September 7th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time from the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, which is a really wonderful nonprofit that is going to be providing reliable information that's going to be universal to both those who are impacted directly and those who want to help. So I just want to encourage you to check that out. Again, we've already mentioned the United We Dream and their advisory The ILRC advisory is printed on the back, and it's got sort of just basic information on the most important things to kind of take away in terms of the end or phasing out of DACA. Again, we've talked before about the mental health emergency toolkit. It's really important to take care of yourself, to take care of your friends, your family, and your community so that we can be in this for the long haul. Information about notarial fraud to make sure that you and your family members are not taken advantage of. Contingency planning in Maryland. If we have time later this afternoon, we're going to talk about safety planning and things that you can do now to sort of proactively take steps to protect yourself and your family. We have in the back a printout of different types of things you can do if you have kids or if you're or taking care of young children in terms of making sure there's plans for their education and access to health care. And then finally, as we mentioned before, the Maryland Immigrants' Rights Coalition is going to be providing upcoming clinics for those who might need help.
Slight clarification, we'll be advertising the clinics.
Oh, pardon me.
We have no staff.
Got it.
But it's the website will be a place where all that information is centralized.